to a brand new episode of Coming Distractions brought to you by the Nerdpocalypse podcast. I'm your host, Jay. Okay, guys, let's talk about Green Book. So this is starring Mahershala Ali and Viggo Mortensen. This is a story of, based on a true story about a guy named Donald Shirley and another guy named Tony Lip. Dr. Donald Shirley was a famous concert pianist, virtuoso, played by Mahershala Ali, who hires this sort of like regular guy, super regular Italian guy named Tony Lip, played by Viggo Mortensen, to be his driver and sort of bodyguard as he does these concerts through the Midwest and the South in the fall of 1962. So what's interesting about this is these two guys could not be from more different worlds. Tony Lip, again, is like from Queens, exactly the, Italian stereotype you would assume from 1962 in Queens, New York, that peppered with like his shitty views on race and, just a very, very small boxed worldview of anything outside of what he knows. And he's a nightclub bouncer at the Copacabana. And basically we see him as the lens by which this road trip happens, right? Which has been controversial to an extent, but I'll get into that. And the Copacabana has to close for renovations at one point for 2 months. So he's looking for work. And what he does is he ends up being hired by Dr. Donald Shirley, who is this eccentric concert pianist, which he comes from what we see at this point is like very high society. He literally lives in an apartment above Carnegie Hall. And it's a weird sort of reversal of what you would think of race relations and, social upheaval and that sort of thing in the early 60s. Keep in mind, this would be right in the middle of the civil rights movement and things like that. So it's kind of interesting because they don't really deal with that, but they deal with race in a different way, which I think is probably part of where a lot of criticism for this movie negative criticism comes in. But so what happens is Donald Shirley hires him to be this bodyguard. And what the movie does is it's sort of a road trip film with them stopping in these different places I wouldn't go now in 2018 by myself, which is kind of funny. But it's like Tupelo, Mississippi, and like Birmingham and all these other places that are just like hotbeds for racist activity at that time. Of course, the entire country was, but those places specifically. And their friendship develops over time as they kind of get to know each other better on the trip and things like that. But where the film really comes alive, in my opinion, is there's talk that this is unfairly focused more on Tony Lip and not as much on Donald Shirley, which I couldn't disagree with more, actually. Like, there's nothing that happens in this film that isn't a catalyst, that isn't caused by the catalyst that is Donald Shirley's character and his journey throughout the world, right? So because he's of high society, he's very much different than what Tony Lip thinks black people are like. And the crux of the film to me is a monolithic view of other communities. Tony's has one view of black people, and it's they eat fried chicken, they listen to a certain type of music, they're really good at playing the piano, but it's only in the type of music that he knows them in. So he doesn't understand how Donald Shirley exists, right? So this is, which makes sense, right? It makes sense that a white person would see black people like this because these are the stereotypes that are portrayed, that black people are portrayed as. God forbid they are anything outside of that. And what he learns by meeting Shirley is that black people are more than just that. They are not just these one-note characters. They actually are as nuanced as white people are in his world, right? But at the same time, you have Lip, who is literally physically protecting this black man across the South, which I think it lends to this notion that it could be like a white savior film. Yeah, he physically saves him, sure, because that was his job. But what appealed to me is Mahershala Ali's performance as not just like, it's not just, hey, two buddies going along and everything is hunky dory, and then they get to the end. There are serious issues that peak up throughout the trip. Serious issues of violence and racial assumptions, and again, they're in the Deep South in a lot of parts of the movie, so you can expound on where that goes. But while Tony Lip may step in to physically save Shirley probably 2 or 3 times, because of course, again, it's the Deep South in 1960s. Where it's not just a one-sided "I save you all the time" movie is that Shirley is constantly making Tony Lip a better person, which is a far larger message that I think a lot of people in criticisms that I've seen may have missed. It's one thing to physically step in and be like, hey, I'm going to stop this fight. It's another thing to transform a person's entire viewpoint of how they see a community and how they see their own community in light of this friendship that they have. Now, what's interesting is those two people in reality were not only just became friends on this trip, but they became friends until the day they died, literally months apart in 2013. So it's a fascinating story. I thought it was incredibly well done. It's really an interesting look at how race relations happen in the 60s between interracial friendships. Because it's a look that we don't get nearly as often. Everything isn't hunky dory in their relationship. There are still things that they deal with even as they become closer. It's not like it ends with everybody holding hands and everything. The world has changed and the world has worked out. Like, yeah, they're friends at the end, but it's still this situation where Tony is still dealing with his family's racism and trying to pull them over, not convert them into being some like perfect characters, but trying to pull them over to see other people's humanity. And it's because of that friendship that has changed him in that 2 months that they spent together. I don't know what will ultimately be the views of this movie over time, but what I will say is I could absolutely see Mahershala Ali getting an Oscar nom for his performance. He is, every moment that he is on screen, which is most of the time, he steals the show. He really does. And that's a testament to his performance. And I mean, Mahershala Ali is a tremendous actor. Viggo Mortensen as Tony Lip is great. Like, he really is great. He does maybe one of the best stereotypical Queen's Italian accents I've ever heard. Like the performances all the way around were really good. I know that, to me, I thought the trailer looked really good. The film lived up to it. Both two actors in the prime of their career, really nailing this story. It's got some comedies of life things. It's got some really hard hitting things. There are things about Donald Shirley that are revealed throughout that trip that gave him a serious amount of depth that I thought was important. And in the end, you really felt like you went on that road trip with them, for better or for worse. So yeah, look, Green Book, I'd give it a 4 out of 5. I thought it was really good. I'd say go see it.
You're watching the Nerdpocalypse YouTube channel. Make sure you click that button to subscribe and check out our weekly podcast where we talk about movie, TV, news, tech, and weird stories from around the internet.